welcome to the August 20th meeting of the Addison Northwest School District Board of Directors. Looking for a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any additions, subtractions, changes to the agenda? I do not believe we need the executive session,
Okay.
so we can remove that. Otherwise, how are people feeling about the organization of the, or presentation of the agenda with the clickable links versus the
Brilliant.
Yes, like it a lot.
page?
Good.
Okay.
Keep going.
All right. All right, so all in favor of adopting the agenda with one change to remove the executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. That brings us to public communication. Do you have any comment from the public? Nothing. Hello, everyone.
To thank you. The agenda changed a little bit for the in-service, so we have a little more time in our rooms. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. All right, we have a presentation to the board, fiduciary responsibilities of the board. Very important topic. Elizabeth's going to present.
I'm gonna come up
Thank
and
you.
sit, and I'm gonna run my own laptop, but if you guys,
I'm gonna move so I can see.
one thing, Sheila has offered to just come run the laptop while I go back to microphone.
All right.
So, as long as they can hear me too.
There's an extra chair.
So these are
There are
the
many extra chairs.
So these are the same slides as Nicole presented last year. Sheila sent them to me. I only have them in a PDF. I don't have them in a PowerPoint like she had them, so I'm just gonna kind of tab down through them as we go through them. And as I look at them, the first page actually, I guess I gotta use my clicker. There we go. So this is kind of like the, what I say is just the list of all the different responsibilities, and then each slide after that kind of walks through what each of these means. So how the board fulfills its fiduciary responsibility. They create a culture that assures focused and responsible management of financial resources within the district. They establish policy relating to the budgeting and financial oversight. They propose a budget and assure approval by the electorate. They assure adequate internal controls have been put in place by the administration, conduct financial monitoring, and be a good consumer of the annual audit. So the first one is ensuring focused and responsible management. They're saying pay attention and be clear that this is important. Failure to pay attention to finances can undermine your fundamental mission and make it difficult to focus on education, which is your primary mission. The legal responsibilities of a board: duty of care, act in good faith and exercise reasonable care and due diligence. Duty of loyalty, avoid conflicts of interest. Act in good faith with the interest of the institution in mind. And the duty of obedience, ensure that the institution's resources are dedicated to the fulfillment of the mission. Establishing policy relating to the budgeting and financial oversight. This is regarding model policy F20, which we all have. I don't have it here with me, our version. It says authority of the superintendent to spend dollars on behalf of the district and the supervisory union, if that's the case. The necessity for regular flow of information. Developing a doctrine of no surprises, basically so that everyone is always in the know. Guidance on financial reporting to the board. Necessity of system of appropriate internal controls and clarity on approval of orders. That would be your director's orders that come through every month. Your regular audit, and your asset protection. Proposing a budget and assure approval by the electorate. When you're building your budget, there's an annual planning process. You reflect priorities of the district establish parameters of the overall budget, the student-teacher, student-staff ratios, etc. Partnership and working back and forth with the administration. The board sets the policy but doesn't micromanage all the line items or the detail within them. Create ample opportunities for community input and information during the development process and in advance of the district meeting. Assure adequate internal controls have been put in place by the administration. So internal controls, what are they? There's a non-technical definition saying internal controls are a system of the checks and balances implemented to prevent improprieties, theft, and to allow human errors to be found and corrected timely, preventing financial misstatement. No two systems or internal controls are identical, but many core philosophies regarding the financial integrity and accounting practices have become standard management practices. I think if we were to look at a lot of different school districts, their internal control system would be relatively close to the same. There might be very minor differences. Internal control consists of all of the related methods and measures adopted within a business to safeguard your assets from employee theft, from robbery, and unauthorized use. Part of that tracking is just keeping a listing of all your fixed assets, which is also required in your audit. So some of this is managed by your audit as well as not just the administration of the school district and the board watching over it. Enhance the accuracy and reliability of its accounting records by reducing the risk of errors, unintentional mistakes, and irregularities, intentional mistakes, and misrepresentations in the accounting process. I think this is really important because in here what I'm seeing as I read it is they're talking about the fact that there will always be mistakes, but the core key to the internal controls is to catch those human errors and mistakes as they happen before it ever makes it to an audit or to a board report or to anything going external outside the school district. School board role in internal control. Expect establishment of internal controls by the administration. Assure an effective system to approve the orders. Assure completion of the annual checklist. So in here they talk about the annual checklist. Title 16 BSA, Section 242A, Internal Financial Controls. The superintendent or his or her designee shall annually, on or before December 31st, complete and provide to the supervisory union board and to all of the member district boards a copy of the document regarding internal financial controls made available by the auditor of accounts pursuant to 32 VSA section 163.11. And actually, I think typically in our district last year, Joanne and I went through that annual checklist together, as there's different pieces that pertain to different people doing pieces of the internal control. We want to make sure we had it all documented accurately. So I'm sure we will do it the same way this year with Sheila. Conduct financial monitoring. The board provides high-level oversight. They review actuals versus the budget. They understand material variances and any issues that would place the district and its finances in jeopardy. Ensure administration has plans in place to address any concerns. Be a good consumer of the annual audit. Understand the scope of services provided by an audit. Expect a report from the auditor and schedule a board discussion of the report. Read in full the auditor's letter, opinion, and management discussion and analysis, as well as notes. If board members have any questions, invite the auditor to meet with the board directly, which I think we typically do every year. We have them come in and go over the management letter and the audit reports in the presence of the board. Does anyone have any specific questions? And I can zip back to the slides if people saw something that triggered, or even just a comment or.
You have a real handle on what goes on. I've observed that on several occasions. What is your feeling of our compliance?
I believe we have good internal controls on almost every level when we're answering the checklist. We do very well in all areas. I think the only area that we struggle a little bit in that area is that we are so small. sometimes in our own fiscal department, trying to juggle, who's gonna do a bank reconciliation versus who books journal entries. And keeping that separate is a little bit difficult in such a small, office environment. And so many people are capable of doing the job, but who should be doing it so that we're not breaching that internal control. That's the only area I see it, and I'm pretty sure a lot of school districts suffer with the same issue. So we're constantly monitoring that and talking about it with the auditors. A lot of times I'll ask their opinion on how we should be doing it differently, if there is any change we can make. And sometimes it's just a matter of having someone else review it, maybe my position or something. And then as far as the financial oversight, I don't know what happened before in your district, before I got here. I know how we kind of went through what we went through in the last year. And we've morphed what you guys see at the board level, and I feel like you guys are getting to see a lot more than what you were before. You're getting to see balance sheets. You're asking questions, and we're able to answer them. So I feel like maybe you as a board are more informed this year than maybe you felt like you were before, which gives you a better grasp. Your finance committee also is doing a little mini audit review as they go along whenever they have their meetings and they come into the office, and then they're reporting back to all of you. I think that's important too. So.
There was an item noted in the management letter, actually several years worth of it, that we are supposed to have an inventory of all of our assets. And I know that that was something that the district was going to work on.
Yeah.
Where are we with that?
So last year, when I realized I could not locate any such item, no listing of every single item, I reached out to all of your departments at all of your schools, and everybody kind of chipped in, started sending me information, serial numbers of assets that were in possession, information about how much they cost when they originally purchased, you name it, all the information we could possibly gather on every item that would be considered a fixed asset in your buildings. We developed a pretty substantial list, along with property values, the values of the buildings, the square footage of the buildings, so not just the stuff inside your buildings, but the actual buildings themselves. We put that all together. We gave that to the auditors last year in that fiscal year audit. It was so different from what they hadn't seen anything from us in the past. So they really didn't feel like they could true it up to anything. Their plan is in this year's audit to take that list and true it up to what they have on record for the fixed assets. So hopefully when we clear this audit, we will have a good tracking system of that. Going forward, I think we're going to need to have some kind of procedure of tracking those items as they're purchased and coming in the door. Your current software doesn't really have a good mechanism to do that. Doesn't have a barcoding machine or anything linked up to it where you can actually be tracking that stuff electronically. Martha has actually started this year updating anything that was purchased this year and adding it to that list that I started last year. So next week when the auditors come, it's going to be all updated with everything that was purchased in the current fiscal year also. So I think we've got a pretty good handle on it. What I don't like about it is it's a manual tracking spreadsheet system, and that is not the best way to do it. But it's going to get us into compliance, and then we go from there.
Thank you.
There's been a lot of conversation over the past few years about changing software systems. Where are we with that? And I know we're waiting on the state and
So, and I have a little more inside knowledge that I haven't shared. As I was on vacation last week, I found a bunch of stuff out. The state selected a statewide software. It is a software owned by the company that runs PowerSchool. They purchased a financial software. They won the state bid for the statewide software. We were waiting to see who would win that bid, thinking it might be Tyler Technologies, which owns your current software, and that they had this other program, Infinite Visions, that we would switch to. As soon as we found out it was PowerSchool, they are brand new to the financial tracking industry, and that made us nervous about just instantly jumping on, switching. They have a very robust switchover plan for the 150-something school districts in the state of Vermont. And initially, I think maybe 36 of them signed on to convert in this fiscal year. There's a group of them going live October 1st, like this October 1st with this program. I just found out while I was on vacation that they are stalling that implementation, and the whole group of business officials is meeting with the Agency of Education at the end of this week, and I'm gonna be up there in Montpelier at that meeting, to discuss,
In the peanut
how do I
gallery
say,
with
their
popcorn watching.
displeasure or lack of, lack of esteem in what the process has been so far. They're not doing well. Burlington School District is one of the districts that was signing on October 1st. They're one of the largest in the state. And they have been very dissatisfied with the level of training, the help on implementation of that whole system, along with converting to the uniform chart of accounts, which is the whole thing. It's coupled all together, this new software, the new chart of accounts. So we are going to convert to our chart of accounts in the existing software you have as we roll out of this fiscal year. We are not signing on to sign up with Power School until we watch all the guinea pigs do their rodeo, and so we're gonna wait. And we can actually sign on, I think we have until the following fiscal year and to sign up and say we wanna go live with that new system. If it truly stands and ends up being the mandate that everyone has to convert, then it will be Power School e-finance that we will go with, because the software, A, is free and it's mandated that we use it. But right now, we're just kind of holding back, awaiting and watching. We don't want to pay for another software if we're going to be forced to take that one. But we also don't want to jump on when everyone else seems to be struggling with it.
Was there any follow-up to the, there was a company that was coming forward saying there was an unfair bid?
Tyler Technologies, the one you existing have, put in a petition basically saying with the courts that the bid process was unfair with the Agency of Education. My understanding is that went through the courts and that their request was denied, and that they saw that the bid process was adequate.
Okay.
I think now the issue is that the current company that won the bid is not showing good performance.
Right, right.
And so that now there's another, that's almost, it's not satisfying the bid in that way, so.
So,
Sorry, when does the new chart of accounts go into effect?
July 1st of this new year. So our plan is to build your budget with your existing codes, and then we're gonna crosswalk you over to the new code system.
so the state mandates that we use this software even though it's,
Never been tested.
that sounds like the state, that's perfect
No,
Montpelier.
it sounds familiar.
Yeah.
And it is, I will tell you, I do know a little bit about the program, and when I watch the tutorials, I've seen the program a long time ago. It actually was originally owned by a place called SunGuard Systems, and it was a more southern state accounting financial software, and it was a pretty decent software, but it wasn't designed for school districts or municipalities per se. It was just an accounting software that was out there, like an enterprise solution. Power School purchased that software, and SunGuard is no more, so they're gone. And they purchased that system, and then since then they've been building the software. So they're adding new features that pertain to municipalities and schools. So I think once they get it, it can be a good, powerful software. It's just that it hasn't been vetted. It's they're building it as they go and seeing the flaws and fixing them as they go and changing the programming on the fly. And it seems more reactive than proactive.
Well, we will be watching,
keep you
be
aware.
watching on the edges of our seats.
That's smart, because you can get your subscribers to pay you for your beta testing.
It's true.
Yeah, really.
Any other questions for Elizabeth on the financial obligations of the board?
So, just as a reminder, every month we'll receive the expenses and revenues every month.
Yeah.
And quarterly, we'll receive a balance of our capital funds. That's right?
Yeah, and I think I'm pretty sure what my plan was to do is quarterly actually give you an updated balance sheet of all of your funds.
Yeah.
All
Quarterly.
funds.
All
That's what I meant.
funds, all
I meant, when
Right.
I said capital, I didn't really know what I was talking
Like
about.
all
I
of
meant all funds.
All the
Thank
funds, right.
But every month I'm also giving you a balance
A
sheet.
balance sheet. Right.
Yeah.
general fund expense, revenue, and balance sheet monthly.
Monthly, yes, and then quarterly, all the funds.
All right, anything else for Elizabeth? Okay, thank you very much for doing that. Okay. That brings us to the action items, so we have some minutes.
I move to approve the minutes of August 13th, 2018.
Second.
Any questions or comments, issues? Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes of August 13th, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll abstain, I wasn't here.
Likewise.
All right, 2 abstain.
Yeah.
Bills and director's orders. Does someone have those?
I have them for the month of June.
Okay.
Sound good?
So we received a message from Lori that she wasn't feeling good and she's not going to be here, but we should have more than June, yes?
Yeah.
Yes, she did it though. So we'll just have to do July when she returns.
That all of it.
Oh,
There's here
Lori has it
as
all, so Lori
Okay.
signed off on it.
Well, no, okay. Lori signed off on it then.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, how do we do this? This is 2 months. I don't know. You want to do it all together or?
I would.
Do 1 month and then the next?
July, yeah.
Okay.
She also has an
All right.
outstanding-
So, I reviewed the bills for the month of June on July 9th for the June month. And so I'll move total bills and directors' orders for $5,026,042.27, which includes, well, let's just move that.
Second.
And
That's a lot.
um,
Why?
Is
why
there-
it
is that so
includes
high?
$3,050,000 and $361 in a loan payment.
There's,
Paying off your line of credit for the year.
Okay.
there's also some
End of
EEI
the
payments in
fiscal
here.
year.
Plus the end of your fiscal, right, there's EEI payments that are totaled in there, because, and even though you're paying those through the bond account, it still
It's
qualifies as a payment going
Those
out.
are payment
Yeah.
going out. Okay.
You guys are getting reported on every, we're
Yep.
giving you the whole, every fund.
And then the payroll for that period is $1,347,189.35. I'll give these to you, Gloria. You have them probably.
And there again, that is high, because you've got summer payroll that's
Right.
approved.
That's right. I learned that. We learned that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To find those accounts. And then, right, but do you understand what's going on here? What she's talking about? Do you all know what she's talking about? We pay fiscal, will you help explain what that happens?
We pay across the
So,
fiscal year.
All of your,
Yeah.
you pay across the fiscal year because your teachers have contracts that basically continue to pay them over the summer. They still get paychecks, like 4 paychecks over the summer. And that is actually payout for their job that they did through June 30th. But they're not getting the pay until July and August. So that they get 26 equal payments throughout the whole year.
So there are
Even though
9,
they're-
10-month employees that are
Exactly.
paid across
In
12
July.
And it's
months.
mostly your teachers, yeah.
Do benefits get paid finished up early, or do those get spread across 12 months?
Benefits, actually, one thing we discovered this summer when we were reconciling is that people had already paid all of their share of their benefits, so we stopped the deductions from coming out of their checks over the summer, because they had already paid their share. But yes, their benefits continue all year long, and normally they would still have deductions coming out over their summer paychecks that pull out premiums on their side, but then the employer's kicking in the other
Right.
90% or whatever the case may be.
So I have a question about this while we're talking about it. So a new employee
Yep.
starts contract on July 1?
Their contract usually is issued, if we know they're being hired on July 1, their contract will say July 1. Their first paycheck does not start, though, until August 28th.
Right, you see
September
what's happening, how that works?
See?
So,
Yeah.
okay.
And so therefore, their first their coverage for insurance doesn't start till then, and then they start having deductions for their portion of the premiums starts at that same time.
Okay, I mean, I understand what's happening. I'm not sure if I can suggest whether it's good or bad, but I think I'll ask you maybe later on. Is this good or bad? Is this a good system?
It's traditional for school districts.
All right. Okay.
It's a fiscal year versus the school year versus, yeah.
I mean, some school districts do treat it a little bit differently with like how they expense it. But it's pretty typical the way you guys have it set up.
Okay. All right, and then the last thing are student account disbursements for approval of $37,091.08. And so that's everything for June.
That's June.
That's June.
This is
Should
July.
we approve that first, and then go to July, or?
Yeah, I don't think so.
So do we get a second?
Do it separately.
I'll second that.
Yep, we already had a second.
Okay, good. I'm glad we did, because we were
Discussion, that was-
discussing. All right, so all in favor of approving those amounts for June, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining?
Good. And then
And
I'm assuming
July.
Lori did the same thing, but just so you all know, in terms of fiscal fiduciary responsibility, I reviewed 10 regular checks, 4 payroll checks, and that includes going back to the contract, and 4 student account checks, okay? And I assume Lori did that, but I don't know. So, but if Lori signed off on this,
She
then
did.
we're good here, okay?
She said last
So
week she did.
I would like to move the approval of bills and director's orders for the month of July of $2,022,886.60.
Second.
Yep, that's-
And then, not yet, I would like to move the payroll check register of $780,968.08. And I would like to move the student activity disbursements of $9,887.97.
Those are, you want all those in the same?
All in
order?
the same,
for
yeah.
July.
Say
Okay.
that last figure again, please.
Yeah, $9,887.97.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, any questions about July?
What are those student activities?
Yeah, I was curious.
Student activities for July?
And if you
Look,
don't know,
I
that's
mean,
fine.
What is it?
I don't know, I mean, I didn't
No,
review
that's-
these. I
That's
mean,
fine, that's fine.
I'm looking at
That's
it
fine.
right now.
I'm assuming that,
No, he has it.
Sports, right?
I'm
that's
assuming
June.
that you should hold your questions for the review that Lori did. But if you have a question
we'll
about
pass
what
this, too.
kinds are done, then there it
I'd
is.
have to look
We'll
at the
pass
check
this and
register
we can-
and see what they were.
Looks like there's some scholarships.
No, that makes sense.
Students also tired of sports.
All right, so all in favor of approving those amounts for
Yeah.
July, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. That brings us to the Front Porch Forum meeting summary.
Cut some checks back to the general fund to reimburse, so they might be reimbursed.
I move that we ask kindly our clerk and our board chair to write short summaries to be posted on Front Porch Forum following regular meetings of this board.
Second.
Do we need to have different people in different communities be responsible, like posting to
Well, there's only-
Ferrisburg versus
Virgins and Ferrisburg, I think, are the only ones.
ideology?
Because Addison, Panther, and Waltham.
So we
are all
got that
different.
covered.
Okay.
I
If it's
actually
us.
have accounts in both.
Okay.
Is there any thought of also posting those same summaries to the Facebook page and or some section of the website?
The entire minutes go on the website.
What about Facebook?
I don't
wouldn't
think
do anything
Facebook is
formal here, but
an
I'd say
appropriate forum.
Each of us could send a kind note to the community groups and ask them if they would like to post them. But this may be more than, I don't think we have to,
We don't have a
We would-
Facebook page
yeah.
for our district.
We do.
we could ask
We
nicely
do.
for the superintendent to post it on Twitter and those places. So, I mean, this
Could
is
be a link.
not, that's not bad.
What about a link in the school newsletters?
So When I worked up this, I want to cycle back to these questions, but there were a couple of questions that came up in the drafting of this document that I wanted to bring up to the full board. So I think it took me about a half an hour to write this up, and that included double checking the spelling of all your names. You guys have really hard names.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Kowski.
And some formatting that wouldn't have to be duplicated every time. But there were some questions, so I sent that to Christina and Sheila, and there were some questions that came up regarding, let's see. Regarding whether the district or the board should be monitoring for communications back if we did these postings. What was the other question, Christina? They were your questions, actually.
Yeah, I was wondering if we wanted to mention there was public comment or address that in this summary. And then also if we wanted to address whether or not we went into executive session or not in this summary. I just threw that out there. I wasn't sure if it was appropriate or not, or just leave that to people who look at the minutes and just go by what the agenda says.
I think you're doing a summary, you don't need to include that in the summary,
Yeah.
because if somebody really is interested, they're gonna read the minutes, and it's there.
So each summary should probably have just the same blurb at the end of, it would never have to change, about directing people to view the full minutes on the website.
Yeah.
And I would think that, given that I don't think we have a very good, correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't have a very involved policy around how we use social media as a board to communicate with the public. That it's more just sort of like avoid doing it without discussing with the whole group. I think maybe another blurb in there about how if people want to contact us to discuss them, directing them the proper function for that. Because otherwise there might be an assumption that we will reply to replies on both of those, either on Front Porch Forum or Facebook.
Yeah.
And
That's a
so it
good
would be
idea.
good to have something in the summary saying that we're not going to do that if we're not going to do that.
Right, if someone has a question, then they need to address it to the district. Because then the district will have the appropriate person answer the question. I don't think it's appropriate to start this as a two-way conversation, because we've already decided in past times when we had some people who were upset that we were not going to have discussions. We might have an announcement, but never a discussion on any of these social media.
So as long as that's made clear in the instructions, I think we can safely ignore whatever questions or comments arise in that forum.
Well, we don't necessarily have to ignore them. We don't respond to them. If it's something that we feel needs a response, we can bring it back to a meeting.
Right.
And then we can formulate a response from the board, right?
That makes sense to me. I guess I just mean that as long as we're clear with people that that's why there will be no response on that platform.
There would be no response on that platform.
Yeah.
Right. And Sheila actually outlined in her email response back here, the two reasons, which is the open meeting law, that you can't be discussing or debating in a public forum without proper warning, and the policy on conflict of interest, that no one of us could respond on behalf of the board without having that designation or,
Right.
or having a conversation. Did you want to say anything more about that, Sheila?
No, I mean, I guess just circling back to not losing sight of the purpose, really, and that is that right now, if someone's interested, they have to take the initiative to go on the website and find the meeting minutes and read them, or review
Right.
the video. This is just a way of, in a quick way, letting people know what it is that you do here. You know, what is the school board working on? So that's really the purpose. So I guess I would just maybe start small and see how it goes before deciding that you're going to post it across many different formats, because I think my only thought is this is you as a board communicating with the public using Front Porch Forum, posting it publicly on the Facebook page, the school district Facebook page, just changes that communication loop a little bit. And I would just want to maybe think about that as a separate process from this.
Tom?
I'm wondering, I don't use front porch forum, so this is a question. Can we track views?
I don't know if you can track
Because
views.
if we can, then we can see if it's actually, if people are paying attention. Because if people aren't paying attention, then it's, it's an hour out of people's,
Right.
2 hours out of people's months.
Good point. I think that it's not so much views, it goes directly, they could probably tell you how many people subscribe, and then it's just an email that goes into your box, whether you read it, I don't know.
Right.
And if you're advertising with them, they can give you all that data, but
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have to pay for it.
But you have to pay
Which we don't
for
want
it.
to do.
Right, yeah, yeah.
So,
So, this is another task for us to do if we take it on. I mean, is there value in doing it? Is there a reason for us to do it? I mean, it was an idea that was brought up, but that doesn't mean we have to do it, right?
Well, from a community engagement standpoint, I think it's a really great thing to do. Just, we're reaching out, we're being proactive, we're giving information about what we sit here and do twice a month. So I think it's a great way to show the public we want them to know we're here and this is what we're doing.
I worry about you taking on too much, Sue. And if the Community Engagement Committee took it on for you, I told Christina at the meeting that I would be willing to do some of it too. But that being said, it should probably be run by you before it gets posted, or maybe you're the one that posts it, I don't know.
I mean, I don't have a problem doing it. It's not gonna take that much. But I'm just saying, if we commit to doing it, then.
Well, I agree with what
One of the things
Christina
I was
said.
thinking about is just maybe do it once a month. Instead of doing after every meeting. And
Yeah,
just do
I
quick
agree.
blurbs that we, during the
Yep.
month of June, we met these times, here are the things.
Yep.
That may take a little work away. You still have to write the thing, so, but you don't have to go onto the front porch forum and post it, which kind of takes a little bit of time. And maybe, because we are meeting so often, maybe we shouldn't, be doing that. Maybe that's a little too much for the public. They'll get tired of it, they won't look at it. But maybe once a month, that might be a better, and it's less, I think it will be less work.
Okay, are you amending the motion?
Well,
It
yeah,
might-
I'll amend it.
It might be kind of weird just to do it why would we choose to report on one meeting and not the
No,
next?
no,
You're
meeting?
reporting on the
No,
month, not a meeting.
report on-
Both meetings
Oh,
for the
just do
month.
the whole month?
Yeah.
All at
So
once?
sometime in,
That's what
like-
you're saying.
The first week of August, September, we would report, you would report on the 2 meetings that we had in August.
I'll
In July.
second John's amendment.
Do we want to vote on the amendment?
Can
Okay.
I-
All in favor of,
Can we get a repeat of what the amendment is?
So here's if we amend it, it'll be that we approve to ask kindly the clerk and the board chair to write a short summary of our meetings to be posted on the 2 front porch forums once a month.
so we're voting on the amendment to
get
post
to that.
once a month
Mm-hmm.
instead
Just
of,
every meeting.
instead of
Right.
1 to 2 times a month, depending on how many meetings we have. So all in favor of amending the motion so that the posting would be once a month?
Aye.
Any opposed? Did anyone have any comments on the sample write-up, the content or format of it? Now, did you guys read it? Because if you didn't read it, maybe.
No, I didn't.
Yeah,
I
so I
read
would
everything,
think,
but I didn't see that.
I should think that it certainly need not be longer than that.
I agree.
I would,
Yeah.
I would
Well,
think
I
this-
borrowed heavily from the sample that we had from another school district.
Okay.
I-
I
Do you
like the way that it was.
have suggestions for
I
parts
loved
to
having links. I
omit?
don't know if we can do that on Front Porch Forum. We can do hot links like
It
that.
works.
It
Yeah,
works?
I think it works.
Well, then that would be, I mean, if you were willing to put the work into that, that's actually fantastic. I think that having, and same with our blurb that goes at the end, if each one could have a link to the full minutes, That would be extraordinary.
Well, that I can't do, but I can put a
Because the full
link
minutes won't be
to,
ready?
right.
And to and.
But I can just do it to the, in fact, I
The
think
place where
if
they
you,
are.
if you click on that ANWSD link that I
Oh.
did, I believe it brings you to the page with the minutes on it.
That's good. That's good enough for
It
me.
didn't do to the, I did it to that page, not to the home page for the district.
Where, and the minutes are,
Well, you
where
have
are
to
they
scroll
on that
down
page?
and you have to go into the minutes folder. I know, we're,
It's coming, it's happening.
you know, when we have our retreat, maybe we can touch on, website.
Yes.
You know, but,
All right, thank you.
for what we have at the moment. Any other, were you done?
I'm done. Yeah, thank you.
Any other comments on the actual write-up itself?
No, I think it's great. And I also think about your question that we empower you to make the choices that you think are best. And just keep it short and do what you're doing, and that's great. If you want to put that we went to executive, do it. If not, I doesn't, no. I would say probably, if it was me, I'd probably say no. Public comment, I would probably leave it out or say there was public comment, and that's it, and move on.
Right, I mean, I didn't include them only because there's always a time for public comment and because we couldn't include anything from the executive session. So you would just say,
Yeah, and
we
for the
had
public,
executive session.
it does seem like that maybe it's a good idea leaving public comment out of the work that we interpret, because then we are telling other people what someone else said.
Right.
And that could, especially if people are upset about something, they might not appreciate the way that
Our
the subtleties of how we summarize that. So probably best to let public comment be public record and just have this communique coming from you and the board
And the clerk.
and the clerk.
Okay.
So we'll do this posting this week then, for after this meeting?
I will add tonight's into
Yep.
that one.
Point
and
of
make it
order.
Monthly, yes.
We voted on the amendment.
No, no, we
haven't
didn't
voted
vote
on the
yet.
motion.
No, I know,
That's why we're still discussing it.
yes. We're not out of
It
order.
sounded to me like it was all over and done with.
No,
I think she
I
meant,
was
so
just,
if the motion
that's
passed,
what I
we
meant,
will
George.
do.
If the
Okay.
motion passed. Sorry, semantics there.
All right, anything else before we vote on this? No? I'm good. Larry's good, okay. All right, so, if you are in favor of myself and Christina posting a summary of our meetings for the month, once a month, to Front Porch Forum, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
One abstain? Okay, the motion passes. So yes, Christina, I will finesse that and send it your way.
Sounds good.
Can I ask, not this, just that we revisit this in 6-8 months?
Yes.
Because, if it's a lot of work and nobody ever says anything, ever,
Right.
about it, then it might not be worth continuing.
Well, and if you drop it for a couple of months and people then say, hey, where's that
Then-
summary?
that-
Then
that
we know
would
to.
be something that we
If
would
it's a
know.
lot of work, I think we might revisit it sooner.
Yes, exactly.
But just, so we remember that,
Right.
not to let it drop.
Good, thank you. All right, we have action item D, authorizing the superintendent to offer a contract.
I move that we authorize the superintendent to offer a contract to a social studies teacher for VUEHS.
Second.
Want to tell us a little more? I know you had some in the
Yep,
superintendent report.
so Julia Beerworth, she comes with about 7 years' experience, middle school and high school, yeah. Don't know if you want to add anything. She seems like a great ad. When I asked her what she liked most, she talked only about students and the relationships that she builds with them, and she especially likes teaching freshmen, and she'll be assigned to a freshman TA advisory, so she'll be taking that group right up through to graduation, so she seemed like a nice ad.
Good, thank you.
Been very flexible, given the fact that she's coming in late and the space that she's moving into has been kind of, had sort of wonky use. But she's easy to get along with, and she comes from CDU most recently, so she has some experience in they're a little bit further along than we are in proficiency-based learning, and she's all about that. So very collaborative, and again, her strength and her focus, and that comes through very, very clearly, is in establishing positive relationships with kids. And she's a musician.
Well, thank you for finding her.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Stephanie, what is she going to be teaching?
She's going to be teaching world geography, modern citizenship. She's going to be supervising the, not necessarily instructing, because that's kind of out of a social studies purview, the financial literacy, and doing a lot of collaborative work with the other social studies teachers. And if we keep her, we'll repost in the spring, but if you keep her, she's got some ideas for some new classes, so.
So she's interim.
All hiring this time of the year is a one-year only position, yeah.
All right, so all in favor of authorizing that contract, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Okay. That brings us to board and committee reports. So we have superintendent's report that Sheila sent us in writing. Do you have anything to add?
I was going to give just a quick update that happened since the middle school gym floor situation that most of you have now heard about. Pretty much the middle school, do you all know what happened? So the roof was left exposed during the rainstorm that we had last Wednesday. So there was severe flooding into the middle school gym, down through the floor to the classrooms below. So the floor is a loss. There was some damage to the insulation in the ceiling down below, so that was all yanked out. The classrooms in the space down below are going to be good to go even this week. So that isn't really the issue. What will remain is, as a problem, will be the middle school gym floor, and the extent to which we're not 100% sure whether the substrate will need to be replaced or not, and they won't know that until they pull up the floor and get into the project a little bit. But in terms of a time frame, we're looking at the end of November probably before it can be completely used again, hopefully in time for basketball season. But it does depend if they have to do something with the substrate underneath, and it will be perhaps even a month beyond that. So.
But this is not at the district's cost.
That's right. So this will be through the insurance company, whether it's ours, whether it's
my understanding is it's contractor
contractors.
error. So that's what we're going with. But we have reported it to our insurance company just so that they're aware of what has happened.
Okay.
So has the contractor accepted that responsibility yet, or is that still?
I've seen verbal
Yeah,
acceptance
I
of
think it's
responsibility.
kind of for the insurance companies to figure out at this point. The information has been reported, and they'll figure out kind of how that works. But it won't be a local expense.
Can I just add that? I guess I kind of want on public record that we had an incredibly optimistic and positive crew working down there, and everybody was like, again. And many of the areas down below the gym were the areas that were flooded out in last July's big flood when it came in. So all those classrooms, all the flooring, but it was different because it was coming down this way as opposed to rushing this way. People had put away a lot of personal belongings, and it wasn't like it was raining down. It was kind of just dripping, along the wall lines and stuff. But there's a crew down there that's been doing a lot of the cleaning in the building. They were hired by the contractors, I understand, and they had just gone through and cleaned that whole area, and they got stuck with a lot of that work. But they are the most positive, hardworking people I've ever seen, and to feel, I mean, yes, they're paid to do this, but they had just cleaned that area, so, but they were up on the ladders, they were pulling that stuff down, and they've just been so positive. So I don't know what the name of the company is, but they've been rock stars, and our custodians have been awesome, trying very hard to get our building, ready, and the other buildings, and everybody's just, gone above and beyond this entire summer. And, we're going to start on time, even with this catastrophe that happened, in the 11th hour. So they all get, an attaboy, attagirl. It's been great. And, it's been nice working with all these people that are just really hardworking and pleasant, even the construction crews. So. I'm done now.
All right, well, thank you for that update. Any questions on the remainder of Sheila's report? Their convocation schedule has been changed. We've started discussing retreat planning, policies. Anything? No. Okay. Business managers report.
I don't think I have anything additional to add. I don't know if anybody has any questions about any part of my report.
Well, okay. I mean, it's disturbing, about the food still. I mean, I don't know what to say, except we've got to get this right somehow.
Yeah, and the only thing we're really waiting on, we actually just got most of the inventory in today, but it doesn't look like it's gonna change that figure any unless there's more to it than that. We believe we're missing the supplies inventory, so when I say inventory, that can kind of adjust. Some of what I mentioned in here is when you purchase a ton of food in June and supplies, and then you're not serving the meals until July or August, your auditors have you book that expense in June because you actually have the goods. But yet, if you can record and adjust it against your inventory and say, I had all that food and it's really not being used until this period of time, you can kind of defer that, and that could change the number a little bit. But from what I'm seeing, it's not gonna be enough to change the number. So it looks like our revenue fell short from what we anticipated. We didn't spend necessarily more than what we budgeted to spend in food service. The revenue is what is short compared to what we thought it was going to be, what was projected. Also, I mentioned in here, we, at the end of the year, which is pretty traditional, you kind of comb through all of your outstanding balances of the students that you have. If they have high balances, and then you take a look, did they qualify this year for free and reduced meals? And if they do, you can't reasonably expect them to be able to pay their last year balance if now they are qualified for free and reduced meals. So you end up writing those off. That also hit this number because we did it in June. We posted it to June, that loss.
Do you know approximately what that amount was?
I'd have to look it up. I don't think it was substantial. It was definitely below this $8,000 that we're over.
Yeah.
But it contributed to the 8,000.
So the revenue fell short. Is that, was that an estimate for the summer revenue or the end of the school year?
It's the whole school year. So basically it's, and it's not just your student sales where the students are actually paying for their meals. It's also the reimbursement you're receiving from the federal government and the state, because if the number of meals you sell or, full meals you can claim is below what you anticipated, we projected too high of how many meals we thought we'd sell, basically, whether it be covered by the federal or state government or the actual student.
But when we spoke and when we approved the 150 for the estimated deficit, and you were thinking it was only going to be around 100, we had data for a good portion of the year about sales and revenue, right? At that time?
We did, except for that the last few months worth of claims for the federal and the state we hadn't booked them yet. We didn't have the money from the last few months worth of claims. So even though we were reporting that in June, we didn't have what the April and May and June claims were gonna be.
Okay.
So that's 3 months worth of not knowing exactly what the revenue was.
So I guess I'm wondering if the sales throughout the school year dipped down at the end of the year, or if we were hoping that they were going to go up and they didn't.
Yeah, I'd have to chat specifically with Kathy about that and the trend, because I know there is a trend. There's some months that are always typical, lower or higher than others. And I don't know if she had a better idea early on that it was going to be that substantial, or if she thought we were going to make it up in that last 3 months.
Right.
Because she was in agreement with me about the 100,000-ish, and it didn't turn out to be that. It ended up being 158.
So, in the coming year, we have to budget for a larger amount of expense for the food service?
I know that we did do that for
Okay.
the current year. So we budgeted for $60,000 more in a subsidy
Okay.
towards the food service program. Let's imagine that that was this year. That still wouldn't have been enough
Right.
if we're looking at what we just transferred them.
And,
There
And-
is changes to staff that happened this year that was not, we budgeted based on who we currently had on staff, but there's been some transitions in who is in what building. There was a natural attrition, so we've made some shifts. So she has a reduced staff to try to save some of that money. That's where your, most of your
Sure.
expense is,
so
besides the food itself.
this food purchase in June, that's something that's gonna happen again
Every
next
year.
year.
Yep.
So we just have to
That
put
has to
more
be
money there
somehow
to cover
managed,
that.
Yeah, well, or manage it in such a way where maybe you're not, if you know that you're not gonna use all that food until, say, the end of July, maybe do a small purchase at the end of June, and then purchase again early July, or, kind of stagger your purchasing a little bit so that you're not, that probably contributed, I would say, anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 worth of
But there's,
purchasing at the end of the
but there's
year.
logic in larger purchases because
is.
the economy of
Overall, you
scale.
save money.
That's why
Buying
we
in
can
bulk.
save money being a
And if it's
single district.
non-perishable items, things
Yeah.
that will save.
Right.
Yes, so there's a trade-off, no matter what you do.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
But we're expecting to close the fiscal year with a surplus of $476,000.
In your general fund, yes. That's after that 150 already went.
So that's good news.
It is good news. But it also means if that, if the food service deficit, after we get done the audit next week, we see that $8,000 is real. In FY '19, we've got to take care of that.
All right, good. Any-
So,
yeah.
well, okay. I don't really know what to do here. I've only been on the board for like 3 years now. And the whole time, there's been an enormous food deficit. And we thought that we were out of it. And it sounds like we're going right back to where we were.
But only 8,000.
No.
Yeah, but it's the wrong direction.
Right.
Of what we thought,
I
right?
think it's
Kathy was here. She told us we had this under control. We were in the right direction. That's the message I heard.
Well, I think she also said it's gonna take some time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's not a one-year process.
What
it
was the
definitely isn't.
deficit?
I was at Addison Northeast before, which is the other district that she is, that we're cooperativing with for this food service program. And I'll tell you, I was there the first year she came in, and the first 3 years, they struggled to get the right estimates, to get the right budgets, to get the right revenue. And now they are on target and they're actually building a balance. So it does take a number of years, and this was only your year one of your food service cooperative.
The other thing is that in previous years, these deficits were building up in all the schools and they just kept building.
And just
Right.
nobody funded them. You
Because
guys are
there was
funding them.
nothing going into it. And now, we may end up with an $8,000 deficit, but we've funded all the rest of it. We're making progress.
Yeah, it's definitely moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
Finn, did you want to say
What
something?
was the initial, when we finally had to retire that giant debt approximately?
Well, it was,
Just for scale.
It was 423,000.
Yeah, so just for a matter of perspective,
Yeah.
it's significantly larger.
right.
It was just a
And we can retire, we will not go into the year with a deficit, even
Right.
with the $8,000 will be
Right.
retired by the
Right.
surplus, right?
Right.
Okay.
At a couple of different meetings over the last year, I've heard that we're not enrolling enough people in the free and reduced. We're not enrolling everyone who's eligible, which is a different statement.
Or
and
we
I'm
may not
wondering-
be.
But that's a parent's decision. It
Right.
isn't the district's decision.
You have to try to get them to apply.
I know,
Yeah.
but I'm just wondering what are our efforts to increase enrollment for those who are eligible? And if that's
Sometimes
relevant.
communicating the impact of that, sometimes parents don't realize what we benefit when they think, my kid doesn't want the school lunch, so I won't sign up. Not really realizing that it's how we become eligible for grants and other things, so it is a pretty important thing, particularly often at the middle and high school, because kids just kind of do other things, and sometimes they're over hot lunch by the time they get to be that age, so
As we come
getting
up
those
to
kids
the next
to-
round of grants,
Right.
doesn't this matter? too?
Yes, it does.
Oh, yeah, it does.
There was a lot of information in the Welcome Back to School packets about signing up and how to do it, and why you should do it.
Is there some benefit maybe in going through the list and contacting all the parents individually?
That happens.
I don't think you can do that.
I
That
think-
you can't do, but you can put out public notification.
As long as you're putting it out to everyone, not just the ones who did or didn't apply.
Right. And we can also get that information out to the public.
That can go in the summary.
Can students enroll anytime during the year, or does it have to be
Yeah.
at the very beginning?
The count for some of the grant eligibility comes from the fall, shore up with all of that, but it still doesn't matter. We'd rather have them enroll than not enroll. And I think it makes a different kind of impact on the bottom line for food service than it does for, say, the consolidated federal grant.
Right, yeah.
It's the October 1st deadline. It's the number that the state uses for grants.
So any questions, other questions for Elizabeth on anything else in the expense report, revenues, the balance sheets? No. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Really, really nice to get all this information in a sensible format. Thank you.
And you know something else? It won't change next week.
I know. It's good stuff. There was a question in the minutes from June about transportation, and Elizabeth has that information, but
Yep.
in the minutes that we approved last week from June, it said that we would report back on the transportation.
Yeah. So I looked up the minutes from June. I also looked up to see what the what Joanne had in her report, and she mentioned transportation and total cost. In her report, she noted that the transportation contract we currently have with Betcha Transit was through 2020. I actually pulled the contract today. It's actually through 2022. So I think that was a typo. There's 2 more years on it beyond what she had. And when I look at it, I was judging the different contract total price. Your price that you paid in FY '18 is what she quoted for the total cost dollar amount, that $466,735. That was the total cost that you actually paid in FY '18 for your transportation contract of just your home to school contract. That means just your buses running to and from school, bringing kids home.
And that's
That
per
is
the
substantial.
contract.
That was under budget because for some reason the amount you budgeted in FY '18 was not, it was quite a bit higher than that. And we used that money and transferred it into other lines to help in other areas that didn't have adequate budget.
Because we budgeted before
Before you knew
that
what the new
contract was
in
negotiated
place.
with the 3%.
Right.
Right.
And so that was, that contract was substantially lower. When you move into FY '19, the contracted price rises by 13%. The following year, it rises again by 13%. And then the next 2 years after that, it only rises by 3% each year. Now, my understanding is that they reduced that contract price for FY '18. It looks like there's notes regarding the consolidation, that in year 1 of the consolidation, it was reduced. I can't tell you exactly what the logic in that is or why then it spikes at 13% for the next 2 years, but then it drops down to only a 3% increase, which is more normal.
Part of that was that the consolidated district was able to eliminate some bus runs.
Some bus runs.
And do we have any figures on what the actual utilization of the buses are?
I did see some interaction back and forth, it looked like between Bob looking up on Power School and people trying to determine what the bus ridership was. Some of the principals were able to give Joanne some information. I don't know if she ever pulled it all together, so we'd have to take a look and see if she ever got a full listing of what the ridership was from each of the buses.
If we've got runs that are running only half full, it might pay to extend those runs to cover a bigger area.
Yep.
And we could eliminate a bus run.
We also might be able to get more detailed information from Betcha Transit themselves, too.
It's, because the reality is that we are not obligated to provide bus service.
Right, absolutely.
And it's a big expense. And so if we're gonna do it, and I understand that although a lot of families don't utilize it. There are some that really need it, but we need to make it as efficient as we possibly can.
Yeah, I know that there was some research into all of that that was started, but I don't think
Started, I
it
just
was
don't,
never
I
finished.
didn't see an end result to it come through my email or my desk.
And I believe some of the increase from Betcha was because they were supposed to be getting cameras on board as well.
Right, and GPS on
Mhm.
the actual buses. Yep, and we did, now, even though it rises 13%, the amount that it is for FY '19 is what we budgeted. So we
Okay.
budgeted the correct amount.
But that, as you stated earlier, is only for the back and forth
It is.
from home to school.
Yes.
Right.
It doesn't cover any athletics or
Yes.
Right.
anything going to Hannaford
Right.
or.
Absolutely, and so there's all kinds of other things. There's field trips, there's athletics, there's the Walden program, there's other transportation, there's special ed transportation that is not in that figure. And so in that contract, there's also a vocational bus. So in that contract, there are stated rates for those other items too, but in most cases, those are based on either a mileage per mile rate or a per day rate. And so to evaluate how much those would cost, you'd have to be estimating how many trips you're going to take or how many, so that's a little more volatile between the years.
But we should be able to go back to last year
Yep.
and see how much additional it cost us over that contract. So
Yep.
we've got
I can
a
tell you,
handle
I
on what.
printed it for you. I printed it, I got it right here.
Great.
It's a separate
So-
line item, right?
Yeah.
Its own line item.
Well,
Several line
Scattered
items.
line
So,
items.
Yeah.
so when I look at, I just pulled an expense report for anything transportation in what is considered your general fund. So that means your general fund, your special education fund, and your early ed combined. So it's everything you see every month. And that contract was only $466,000 of the total, but the total you paid out was $768,000.
Wow,
Okay.
300,000 more.
Yeah. And then if I ran a FY '19 just to see like, what is your total budget, including the new contract and what you have budgeted for all transportation in in just the general fund, including sped and early ed. And your budget for this year is $897,000.
And what's the contracted amount for the
The
home to school?
contracted amount of that is $536,000 and change. I'm not giving you the,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
So it looks like
So
we've actually budgeted for what it's gonna
It's
cost
gonna
us.
cost, yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah, that's what I did look at that also, just to make sure we look like we budgeted the right amount.
This was,
All right, well, thank you. That's all, a lot
And
of
we
information.
can look into
on-
the ridership to see where that landed, because I
Right.
know it was under discussion, and there was a bunch of people who responded, I just don't know if it all got collected.
The problem with scaling back too much is that it can fluctuate.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you
Right.
can't tailor it specifically to who's riding it today, because it can change tomorrow.
oh, I understand that.
Right.
It needs to be a survey that's done over a period of time.
Period of time.
I fully understand that you can't just pluck a set of numbers from one day, because that might be the low day of the month, or it might be the high day of the month.
Or from one year to the next.
Yep.
Well, it also runs into equity issues.
Yeah.
If there are
Yeah.
kids who have to ride the bus, and we just cut back how many buses there are, now you're forcing those kids to be riding a bus a couple hours a day.
Oh, it doesn't necessarily have to become a double-length run.
But the point is taken, that we could
Yeah.
explore
I
and
think it's
see
worth
if there's
exploring,
any
but
improved
not just
efficiencies
assuming we can make a change, yeah.
that could be made.
I mean, and our policies ask for that.
Right.
The back and forth.
And also, just as a matter of back, we've asked for information about transportation, the numbers.
Right.
For like every year that I've been on here. And so it's
Yeah.
time to learn from Betcha
Right.
exactly the exact number of students who ride every day. I mean, there's no reason why we should not know that. So please.
There's a
help us get it.
checklist every morning, every afternoon. They know who's gotten on that bus.
At the, yep.
I mean, the
elementary
schools
Yeah.
know who gets on at the end of the day,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so,
Not so
anyway.
much at the high school though, right?
Well, maybe not the high school,
No, probably not, yeah.
but it wouldn't be that.
Well, and at the high school, you have some students who drive themselves or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, we've got more information than we've had in the past.
That's true.
We got,
Small wins.
we got
Moving in the
numbers
right
on,
direction.
on what the buses cost.
We know what they
That's
cost.
tremendous.
Okay. All right,
I
so if
even
there's,
read your mind, George. I brought it with me.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
If that is all for the business manager, we'll move on to our committee reports. And first up is community engagement report.
Okay, so we have met twice. We met in June and we just met last Thursday to plan our community conversations meetings. The first one is going to be on October 25th, and the second one is going to be on November 8th. We are going to use our $600 grant that we got to provide dinner through the food service. And we're going to ask for RSVPs so we have an idea of how many people are going to come. And then we're going to have a donation basket. We're going to not ask anyone to pay, but if anyone feels like donating, that could help fund our second meal, because we're not quite sure we're going to have enough money to be able to run 2 of these, but we really feel that's important. So we're going to start out with we're going to have dinner and then have an icebreaker and then go into the presentation. Marilyn Woods, who is a former teacher from VUES but lives in Ferrisburg, when she retired, she started looking into the history of education in this area, and she is going to help put together the past part of the presentation, and Christina's going to talk about the presentation.
Yeah, so I think all of you know Joanne started a PowerPoint for us at, just before she left. And so Marilyn, we've looked at that PowerPoint, and when we just met, we decided to divide the presentation up into 3 parts, this PowerPoint. The first part will be about the history of our district, which we used to be 16 districts in Ferrisburg alone or some crazy thing like that. So
Like, tell about how many school districts in Ferrisburg.
I can't remember the number. It was like
16 school districts in
Just in
Ferrisburg.
Ferrisburg,
Just in Ferrisburg,
So-
there were 16 school
I think
districts.
that we were over like 200 school districts. It's crazy when you hear the history. It's very interesting. So we're going to do the historical piece first, and then we're going to have a few slides in the presentation about where we are now, which will reflect on enrollment, budget issues, pressure, the budget pressures that we're getting, you know, from the state and taxpayers. And then the third part of the presentation will be kind of where do we go from here, which will lead into our next activity. And the hope is to have this PowerPoint be, you know, no longer than 15 minutes or so at the most. And Marilyn has agreed to present the historical piece of it. We were hoping maybe Sheila would be able to tackle the next part, just because you're the face of our district. And that seems more appropriate than one of us getting up to do that presentation. And then Diana will talk about what happens next.
So that, I'm sorry, can I just?
So then, we're going to break up into groups.
Can I just ask a clarification?
What?
real quick?
Yes.
So those 3 parts of the presentation you're thinking would be on the first, all at the first night?
Yeah, so the icebreaker activity first, then we'll all sit down and watch a hopefully somewhat short PowerPoint, and then break into the real meat of the meeting, which is what Diana's going to talk about next. And it's for 2 hours, so it's a lot. It's going to be a lot to pack in.
So then we're hoping to use student facilitators who we will train, and I've been in touch with Stephanie and we'll be in touch with her again about getting some student leaders who are interested in being trained to help facilitate these next discussions. And it'll probably be about 8 to 10 people in smaller groups, and we're going to ask 2 questions. The first question is, looking to the future, what are your creative ideas for addressing declining enrollment? And they will be writing on sticky notes and posting them, and then sorting them out to see kind of what comes to the forefront. And then the second question is, what are your current concerns about our school district? And do the same thing. And then we'll do a debrief with the entire group for about 10 minutes. And then, based on what rises to the surface from that feedback, that will kind of guide our next meeting in November. We're hoping to advertise through the PTOs, Facebook, Front Porch Forum, newsletters, save the date flyers, at open house. And we're hoping to find 8 student facilitators.
How many people are you hoping for?
We have no idea.
40 to 50.
That's what we're hoping for.
So why did you, just out of curiosity, why dinner? Why not like snacks?
I would also say, I think you know that we did this in my district. We had 4 study circle events, 4 2-hour events over the course of a month. And that's exactly what we did, because also there's not time to get everyone through a buffet line. That will end up taking up all of your time. So we had cheese and crackers and fruit, and people could just grab actually on their way to the breakout. So kind of as a break in between the first part and the second part, the cheese and crackers and so forth is out, and people can just take a snack and go to their circle of 8 to 10 and just have a snack.
And we did talk about that.
We
just
talked
doing-
about that, and we can talk to Kathy about it too. I mean, maybe it could be family style. I think when people eat together, it brings the community together. We're also going to be providing childcare, so the children would come to the meal part, and then they would go off.
And you have 2 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, so we've broken it down 20 minutes to eat, but maybe the buffet line is interesting feedback. We'll have to talk about that again.
Some members that are on the committee that really advocated strongly for food, and I mean, that is the dinner time.
I'll
Yeah.
tell you,
What
I'm
time
a
is the
member of
meeting?
an organization that we always meet for lunch before our meeting. There is more that happens at the lunch than there is at the meeting. Very seriously. I understand both sides of this discussion, but maybe stretch the time out a little bit so that you got more time to devote to the meal.
Yeah.
Or if you're
Sounds like-
talking about family style, have the 4
Yep.
separate foods, and so when you break
Right.
off, your food is at the table where you're
Yep.
gonna have your breakout session. Kids
Right.
can come in, eat as people are settling in, and then go off. You don't have any lines. They
Well,
can
that's all
snack
great
during.
feedback.
I think maybe the takeaway is not that food is a bad idea, but just to make sure that there's enough time that people
Yeah.
could not feel rushed.
Yep.
So I have a question about the 2 conversation topic questions that you have. I'm wondering if we could, the first one's, I think, is great. What are your creative ideas for dealing with declining enrollment, I think is what you said. The second one, could we broaden it so that it gets all sorts of feedback and not just concerns?
Can you say a little more about that?
So I think you said, what are your current concerns with our school district?
Mhm.
And maybe people would have positive feedback about our school district? Could you
Oh,
maybe
I
say
think-
rad
something,
idea.
something like, currently
Currently
what
feel?
works for you or doesn't work for you
Uh-huh.
in the given, in our current system?
Right. I think I hear exactly what you're saying. I think the concerns was kind of, we didn't want to have it be a bashing the district session, and we know that people are really still not the whole unification, like, we're on it as a board, but we know from our feedback last year that a lot of communities are still struggling with unification, so we wanted to give people an opportunity to say something without making it feel negative. But I think that's a point well taken, to add a positive in there as well. No, I
Do
will.
we want, what is the purpose behind wanting to suggest that people give positive feedback?
What is the purpose behind gathering the concerns?
So that we can correct things that we're doing wrong potentially?
Yeah, but we
So
should be
would-
able,
Reinforce
So we would
things you're doing well.
expand on what people feel is going positively.
yeah.
Okay.
We want to celebrate the positives and show that we've actually done something that people approve of. Right?
Okay.
What is,
And that they're
Well-
different goals. One goal is
Yeah.
to inform the decisions that we make, and the other goal is positive PR.
Yeah.
but I see
I
that as
think it's
different.
also a strengths-based approach from what I'm hearing. It's like building on what's working. So if having a range of learning opportunities is something people feel is a strength, then we know that's a priority going forward.
Okay.
I mean,
If somebody writes something that's specific to one of our schools, then maybe that's something we want to try to expand to
Right.
other schools.
Yeah, that makes sense.
there are some schools right now that are so upset about Act 46 that they're actively considering closing their schools and tuitioning all their students. And we got past that. We got to an accomplished
John, any
point.
comments on this?
I think that there's got to be some positives out there for that to have happened.
Tom?
I've two questions that are kind of related. The larger question is, like, other than community feedback, which is a good thing, what is the kind of, which is a good thing in and of itself, and that wasn't flip at all. It's good to know what the community thinks and is concerned about. It sounded flip in my head. Is there a specific outcome that the committee is seeking for? And if there is 2 weeks enough time between the two meetings in order to adjust and make the changes that you might want to make in order for the next, or is the second meeting going to be essentially the same thing with a different group of people?
The second meeting is not going to be the same thing with a different group of people. I think the second meeting is going to drill down further at taking what came up at the first meeting and then drill down further. But let me go back to your first question. I think that our purpose is, with declining enrollment in this district, this is a huge issue, and we want the community to know that we want their feedback, that this is something that we don't want to make a decision as a board. Okay, we're going to close Addison School, or okay, we're going to, we want the community behind us. We want them to feel like they're part of the solution, and they may
Wherever
have some
those
creative
solutions may
ideas
be.
out. What?
Wherever those solutions may be.
Right. So we're trolling for
So
feedback.
would you give us a report in January? I mean, I don't know, January or March, or like what would be the next, what would be the goal? What would you be doing? What would be the feedback to this,
We
to
would be
us?
bringing that feedback back to the board.
I mean,
So
hopefully
that we can
to inform,
prioritize for the budget?
I mean, to inform maybe some decisions that we will have.
That happen there?
That we will be
All right.
making related to the budget, to get some
I'm not sure that,
information to inform
I
the-
think that's a little too fast-tracked to think that we're going to have a solution at the end of the November meeting that is going to necessarily impact our budget for next year, but it's the beginning of that conversation of, what are some of the possibilities out there? What do you want for your students? What, and also, the whole idea of giving the history is that this schooling in this historically has been constantly changing all the time, and it will continue to change. And that's a reality. So how can we all be part of that?
And another thing, it's not just procedural data that we get from this sort of activity, that, although we may get that would inform our budgetary decisions, but it's also the process of this kind of meeting itself that encourages the community to be involved and be thinking more proactively about the role of the schools in the community, as I see it. I wasn't at your
Yes.
meeting, but it seems to me that that's also a very important part of doing things like this, which goes above and beyond the scope of what we as board members normally think of as our job description. It's not about fiduciary responsibility necessarily and policymaking all the time. Part of it also is just an opportunity for schools to have a more, current and active and vibrant part in our community's thinking. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we change our policies, but it does mean that people have an opportunity and a voice when they, don't come to open session or whatever.
Right, that's the whole thing. We say public comment, but it isn't the public that's here, it's people that are involved in the system and the process.
We
And
love you.
what you're,
They're still public.
I know that. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to actually engage the public and get them to express opinions and maybe get more involved.
Are these guys-
That's what your whole purpose
Are
is.
these guys invited to the thing? The guys
Everybody's
who,
invited.
people who are here?
Anyone,
Yeah.
anyone,
Okay.
yes.
But
Just making sure.
I mean,
And I think to expand upon what George is saying is, our school board meeting, the public comment, 3 minutes at the mic, doesn't get any feedback from us. We can't really engage in.
You're right.
In anything. We can't go outside the scope of our agenda.
So again, will there be a community engagement meeting between these two? Because that's 2 weeks to take what might be an awful lot of information and then transform it in some way. It's not that I'm questioning what you're doing, it's that I'm a little unclear about the
most likely, we will
process.
probably have to have a meeting after the first session.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how we would not, we would have to do that to digest what happened and figure out.
And scheduling those two was a nightmare.
Yes, it
I mean, it
was.
took us literally probably 45 minutes to come up with those dates because they conflict with
All sorts of stuff.
all sorts of stuff. I mean, it was like,
And December's not any easier.
and so that this can go into the summary tonight, where are these going to be held and what time? You said the dates, but
At the library at the high school. And if we have a meal, probably in the cafeteria, if we do snacks at,
From 6 to 8.
yeah.
6 to 8,
6 to
okay.
8.
And would there be a mechanism for people who cannot attend to offer their input? I mean, I know that when you did that survey last year,
We
I
have
don't
not
remember what
talked
time of
about
year.
that, but
That a lot of
Yeah.
people said surveys were what they liked
Right.
best.
I mean, we
So-
maybe that's the next plan of attack, is taking a survey after we do 2 public events.
You could use those public events as a kind of
Figuring out what
as a
goes on the
focused
survey.
study to figure out what to put in your survey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, I would think that would be more useful than trying to concoct a survey off the cuff ahead of time.
Well, I was just thinking for other people to respond to these same 2 questions who aren't able to attend.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing too, I
it's just
just
a
want to
thought.
throw
It's
out,
a good idea, I'm just like, when?
yeah,
Yeah, no, I
yeah.
I hear you.
I wouldn't design a survey around those, I would just send the questions.
Well,
out.
just the 2 questions. It doesn't need to be a survey, yeah.
Well, maybe in your summary of meetings that occurred, you could indicate that those meetings were held and the questions were asked. And then that would get it out to a whole mess more people who, hopefully, some of them would comment someplace.
We can talk some more about that, I guess, and see.
All good suggestions. Thank you.
One thing I just wanted to throw out about these 2 events too is that I feel like these 2 events are going to really be building on our vision statement of, working collaboratively with all the stakeholders. It's a jumping off point for us to start doing that. So it's kind of taking the vision statement and then acting on it by holding these events, so. Anyway, just
And
way to
it's
think
really
about
about building relationships, too.
and, yeah,
So what does the committee need from the board at this time?
Thoughts and prayers.
Well, one of the things I sent you an email about was, what if we run out of money? But I think we have enough money to do the first event, and we will have to, there's no line item for community engagement in our budget, so,
So I guess make the money stretch.
yeah.
Well,
I think, I mean, I don't know. I'm no party planner. It seems like that would be,
if we could do
good amount of
stacks
money.
and be covered probably with the full amount that we have. If we
Right.
did a dinner, a dinner would cost basically what we have, dinner and childcare.
I feel like when you ask
Good
people to come
potluck.
from 6 to 8,
yep.
you need to do more than cheese and crackers.
So by doing a meal, you're supporting the nutrition services program. And we have a history in this district of moving money from one line item to another when necessary. I'm sure that the business manager and the superintendent can come up with money for your second meal if
That
your
would be
first is
lovely.
successful.
Or maybe you could think about it.
That would be great.
So the presentation obviously is underway, correct?
I'm hoping that we will have a chance to show you the presentation at the September, wait a minute, we won't though, because we won't have met. Will we have had our meeting? I don't think we
When's
will
our
have had our
next
meeting.
meeting? Yeah, I don't know. No, we won't have met by
On the
then.
10th and the 17th in September.
And we are meeting on the 20th.
We could probably preview it, though.
Marilyn is a former art teacher, and she really knows how to make things look good. And so she's kind of working, she's got all the data, and she's working on putting together a presentation, so I can ask her.
October 8th.
Also October
Or-
8th
or
or
fif-
fif-
or
or
15th.
15th.
Oh, right,
So maybe October 8th?
8th, yes. She's gonna have something to show us at our September meeting, so we could show you on the 8th. So I will
Okay.
write that down.
And we're hoping all the board members would.
Hmm?
That'll take up 12 slots. Okay. Anything else from community engagement or anything else? Any other questions? Okay, facilities.
So, just very briefly, because
Thank you.
Ken reported to us last week, and I watched it, and he didn't say anything that he didn't tell the facilities committee, and we haven't met since then. But I would like to clarify one thing that seemed confusing to me. It seemed like the board might be a little bit confused about, that the scope of the project is on time and on budget, right? That things like the chimney are out of the scope of the project. So really the important thing is that we're on time and on budget, and we're starting next week even with mild disasters.
Awesome.
So that's all I want to say.
It's very good news. Thank you. Any finance?
We
We're
meet later
gonna
this
meet
week,
soon.
Thursday.
Yeah.
Meeting soon. Good update. Okay.
Yeah, okay, Thursday.
George has some update on negotiations.
Yep, we've received a letter from the Teachers Association, and they have agreed to meet with us on October 8th at 4 p.m. And we have a meeting scheduled with the support staff on the 4th of September.
Also at 4, right?
So both of those are set to leave the starting gate.
Great.
Excellent, good luck.
Any policy committee update?
No, we need to meet in September at some point.
Okay.
That's it.
Lori is not here, so.
Yeah, I mean, for the record, okay, Glory put up on our website every single procedure required by this
Yes.
board this summer, and they're all there.
Oh, I've got to
Yeah.
go.
Right, so not meeting is actually not a crisis.
No,
because
it's a good thing.
the committee did the work that it was supposed to, and Glory
Right.
put up a whole lot of stuff, and Sheila
shape.
said earlier that our policies are in good
Just
shape.
like that needs to go
Yes.
in the notes.
I have to say,
RETN,
I think
it's really
Sheila-
important.
Sheila has said no less than 3 times at least when I've talked to her about how good we are for policies and how organized the policy manual
So
is.
good. So much so, I
good.
had 4 copies of your email that detailed. I
Oh.
kept printing it and carrying it with me, and I realized today that I actually had 4 copies of it. I like it that much.
Okay, good, good. I'm just really appreciative. I mean, we didn't have any policies, we got them.
That's what I told her.
We didn't have any procedures.
You're right.
We got them.
Yeah.
They were not public, they were not available to the public. Glory
They
made
were
them available to the public.
IP
Thank you.
in process.
They were all
I'd like to thank
really
Glory, but I'd
matters.
also like to thank John,
Well, yeah.
because you
Yeah.
did yeoman's work all year.
We did.
So we're
Yes.
good.
You kept doing it, and you kept
Yep.
fixing what we.
Thank you. We're good,
It's all
we're
good.
good. So we'll meet, we'll keep going. We have other
Well-deserved
things to
break
do.
in August
Yeah.
then, for you all, right?
But now we're kind of on a
We're good.
schedule,
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah.
great. Good. And Christina, anything from Hannaford Career Center?
No, they did not meet this month,
Okay.
so I have nothing to report, other than they had another maker fair recently. They're really trying to use their space and attract
Okay.
people.
So can I just ask a question? We all got an email from somebody, economic development or something, wanted to do wraparound. And I was thinking about the Career Center and wondering if anyone's going to that, and
I was hoping to go.
are you?
Thank you.
I'm trying to clear my schedule so I can go as well.
It's at Basin Harbor.
Yeah.
Is,
I
Friday
have
night.
another meeting in a different part of the state that day, so I'm just trying to.
is it Friday night?
I don't
It's
know.
kind of what Stephanie's been talking about. Are we providing what the local economy needs? Are we educating our kids to,
Right.
Yeah.
Or the world economy?
yeah.
I love that.
You're just sending kids to other technology centers, tech centers, to take programs that used to be available here that are no longer.
Right.
Because they didn't have enough students
Yeah.
Right.
to continue the programs. Right.
Yep.
Okay. So, yeah. I think discussion items, we have the work plan. That's, basically, there's the link to the work plan. Sheila moved it into a table instead of the spreadsheet, so it's a little less cumbersome, at least.
It fits on a page.
Yay.
I consolidated the 3 columns into one so that it can fit on it's a legal size page, though, just FYI if you're gonna print it. But I think it will be a little easier to edit. And I tried to crosswalk it. It looked like you'd already done that with, policy, so the updates, were sort of, strategically placed throughout the year according to the, requirements. And then I added the, presentations that the administrative team will be giving, as well as a couple that we then also added. So, for example, the safety presentation, you had asked about that, and also you'd asked about a follow-up to the insurance. So I added those onto the education part of the meetings for a couple of those throughout the year. So those are the changes that I've made to the work plan.
And so in general, we're trying to do the business meeting at the second meeting of the month when there are 2, and then the first meeting of the month would be more educational presentations. And I guess that's about it. And it's, this isn't done. This is kind of a working document, so it may not look exactly the same if you click on it again next week or next month. But, does that make sense? Now you all have that?
Thank you.
Well, I just would like to say I'm glad to see one thing in the community engagement column because it has been completely blank for a couple of years. So I'm glad to see you're starting to
So if
add
there are
things.
additional.
Thank you.
If there are additional things to put in that column though, Diana, you can definitely send those to Sheila and she can put them.
Right, well, I did send a whole list to Joanna and they never made it in the column, so I'm glad to see.
That you still have the list? Could you resend it to me? Possibly?
Well, it's from before. It's
Oh.
things that we had done before, but I think like our 2 evenings that we're having could go in there and, I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think it always has to be, I think as long as we're in communication, it's what we're doing about community engagement as a board and as a district. That, and I could be wrong. It was board work plan, so.
Yeah, I think I was a little unclear, it was a really good process for me to crosswalk everything from the spreadsheet into the table because I had to really read and analyze like each little chunk of text. But I think what's not evident is this also then the work of the committees? Or is this what's happening at the board meetings and the committee work is happening elsewhere? And in which case, we might want to link a committee work plan from this document. So if the engagement committee has its own work plan, it could be linked from
We
this
do have a
document.
document that I can send you.
Yeah, so we could link that here, and then this could be the summary of the reports that are happening at the board meeting. I mean, it depends on however, and we can sort out some of this, I think, at the retreat, because
Right.
solidifying the committee work and the board work going forward is basically the topic of the retreat, but, this, I think it will start to get really long if we put dates other than the board meeting dates
Right.
in between meetings.
Okay.
It could end up not meaning anything, this summary, if we put everything in here.
Yeah, I agree. Like, so just for, when you read this, I mean, the policy things on here, the expectation is that we will bring those things to the board on those dates.
Right.
Yeah. It's according to policy, what's then required for a report. It's just a quick blurb about
Right.
what's required. So it's not what the policy committee is working on in the meantime.
Oh,
Exactly.
Editing on the fly.
you're playing with the document.
I
Please
just
don't.
put those
Editing right
dates
now.
in.
Perfect, but it freaked me out.
I love it. Thank you.
And to present the slideshow to the full board on October 8th, right? Because
Yes.
that's what we just said.
Right.
See all those icons in the corner?
Technology.
Yeah, we're all on it,
Right.
we're all
It's really
watching
pretty
it.
cool.
Okay, so if there's nothing else on the work plan, then I guess we are ready to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
All right.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, I wasn't ready.
This is why you